Hi everyone, Kendall here, and welcome to our currently the last block for our Brackman quilt along. As I said, I will be continuing to make these blocks and releasing the videos on a Saturday, but after a short 2-week break. So the decision has been made. I'm going to take 2 weeks off, and then we'll also on the Saturday move to a 7 p.m. time slot. As your daylight savings changes and ours has started already, it puts the time for these videos close to midnight for me. So if we move it to a nighttime video, that'll make it in the morning for me, which is a lot more manageable. So without much further ado, let's spin that wheel and see what block 12 of our Brackman sampler will be. Alrighty, this is the last time we get to spin the wheel for our Brackman sampler. Let's go! Block number 1678. Block number 1678 gives us the chain and hourglass block, which is another Nancy Page design, and it's very similar to our block from week 11 that was also Nancy Page. This appeared in a syndicated mail order column, which was written by Florence LeGank Harris, and it appeared in many periodicals in the late 20s and 40s. Just so it didn't look as similar to last week's block, you could see there that pointing towards the center, it looks like those same 4 houses that we had on last week's block. So I've made one slight variation that turns those houses into arrows, and that is what I'll be demonstrating throughout this video. All right, let's go. So here we have all of our pieces and parts cut out that we need to make this week's block. And once again, we do need to make some strip sets. Now, the original design for this block was a 9-inch block. So each of your strips were all the same size, being 1.5 inches. But I've had to make an adaptation to take it up to the 12-inch block. So we actually have a wider strip that's going to go in the middle and 2 thinner strips either side, being that F goes with B and C goes with E. So just remember where all of your pieces and parts are. But if you do get confused after you've sewn these strip sets, just remember that the thicker strip goes in the middle. In all instances, we will press out towards the darker of the 2 fabrics. So let's just get all 4 of these strip sets made, and I'll be back with you. So you'll see that we need to make 2 strip sets that have our print fabric on the outside and 2 that have our background fabric on the outside. Now you could do these from long strips to start with and cut them down to the unit size of 4.5, but I just chose to already have all of the individual pieces cut, and that is what is in the pattern. Now that we do have those strip sets made, we need to move on to making our quarter square triangles or our hourglass blocks. And to do that, we're going to take our A squares and draw 1 diagonal line on the back of each of these, match those up with our D squares, right sides together, take it to our machine and stitch 1/4 inch on each side of the drawn line. With our stitching now done, well, I like to give these a press first and settle those stitches down into the fabric and remove any tension that has been created from sewing along the bias. We now need to cut these in half along our drawn line before once again taking them to our pressing mat and pressing everything to the darker of the 2 fabrics. In essence, what we are creating is the 2 at a time half square triangles. But once we've finished these steps, we will not be trimming them down, as to create our quarter square triangles or hourglass blocks, we have one more step that we need to undertake. We now need to take 2 of these half square triangle units and place them with the colors opposing, and this allows for you to nest that seam allowance in the middle. So this is very similar to if I was about to trim these down with my 2 at a time method, but we're not going to do that. What we have to do now is draw another diagonal line in one direction only across this seam allowance, as you see me doing here. And I like to put the side of the fabric with the seam allowance facing up, as you can see the piece on the table. And that means when I take this to the machine, the feed dogs and the pressure of the foot will help nest that seam as snugly as possible when we come to sew this again. So just like our 2 at a time half square triangle method, once we've drawn this diagonal line, we'll take these to the machine and stitch 1/4 of an inch on each side of this drawn line. And with that stitching now done, I'm just showing you on one unit at the moment, but we do need to make a total of 5 of these. So just like with the half square triangles, I do like to give this a press first before once again cutting it in half along that drawn line. I then take it back to the pressing mat, and I like to spin these seams the same way as you have seen me do in previous videos to press everything into place. It just spreads out all of those seam allowances and reduces bulk in the overall block. Because they are just straight seams and we have no bulky half square triangle seams coming together, you can just twist that and it will open out those few stitches that we need. We're then going to press all of the seam allowances in the same direction, which you can see me doing here, and you've seen me demonstrate in previous videos, and we will get the flattest block possible. Spinning the seams here is not 100% necessary. You can just press them in one direction. It is just something that I prefer to do. So from each set of these, we will get 2 1/4 square triangles. And for the final block, as I said, we do only need 5, but you will end up with 6. With all of our hourglass / 1/4 square triangle units now made, we do need to trim these down to their final measurement of 4.5 inches. This is quite simple. We need to bring in a square ruler, making sure that we have a 45-degree line on there. We know that the trim down measurement is 4.5, so we want the center of this block to sit at the 2.25 inch mark on our ruler, making sure that our 45-degree line is running along one of those seam lines. 2 other places you can check is on the top left corner and the bottom right corner, and your 4.5 inch measurement should intersect those seams. Once you've trimmed those first 2 sides, we can now just line up our freshly trimmed sides on our 4.5 inch measurement, making sure our diagonal is on our seam allowance. Once again, we can check that that central point is at the 2.25 inch mark, and we can trim those final 2 sides. While this is a little bit more involved and may seem complicated, it is quite simple, and after you've done a fair few of these, it will become second nature. For this pattern, we are only doing 5, but who knows what the future blocks may hold. You can make these corner units using your Quilt dies, and you will need to use shape 4, which is the 1/4 square triangles, And I've just supplied the cutting instructions to make just these hourglass units. For the strip sets, you could use the strip dies, but because they're weird sizes, it's probably best to rotary cut those. Now that we have all of our pieces and parts cut out, we do need to just lay this out as per our original pattern. And as I said in the beginning, I've made the one adaptation to make all of these look like arrows and point towards the middle. The way I'm laying it out now is the original, which gives you the little houses or the huts, which was very similar to last week's block. So I've just simply rotated that center block to make it look like arrows. So it's a point of difference from last week's block and gives a little bit more of a visual stimulation. Whatever that means. Now that we have this laid out in our 9-patch, we just need to apply our 9-patch construction rules by sewing all of our vertical seams, followed by our horizontal seams. In all instances, we will press towards those strip units, and that will allow for nice nesting when we come to sew our horizontal rows together. I'll come back and talk to you again when we get to those horizontal rows, because right now, I can't remember how I press them. I assumed this is what I was going to do, but I had to wait and see, just like you, because we do have bulk coming together there with our quarter square triangles and up to 6 layers of fabric in some instances. I am going to open up these intersections and spin them as you've seen me do before. So to achieve this, first of all, I just like to give it a little bit of a tug to see if I can break those stitches. If I can't, I bring in our friend Jack just to pull those stitches out and open up that seam allowance. You pay attention to the direction of your vertical seam. So in my instance, it's hard to see because I clipped in, which I don't know why I did that. And you make them all go in the same direction, be that clockwise or anti-clockwise. If, like me, you find that one of your seam allowances still doesn't want to sit in the direction that you're making it go, snip into but not past the stitching line and let that go in the direction it would like. So we will spin the intersections on both of these horizontal seams and our block for this week will be done, but stay tuned for optional layouts and a view of my completed quilt. And there we have it, block 12 of our Brackman sampler sew along. Here's what just this block would look like on repeat in a 3x4 setting. And then I thought, well, how about we break that up a little bit with my classic sashing and cornerstones. Then I thought to myself, what would this block look like if we mixed it with the block from last week? And here is what that would look like in a 3x4 setting. And once again, just separated by some sashing and cornerstones, you get another completely different block and look. And once again, this would look excellent, really scrappy. Okay, what another interesting block, and I hope that you forgive me for just changing the direction of that quarter square triangle or the hourglass block in the middle to make it look more like arrows so that it didn't appear like houses like our week 11 block. As I said in the beginning, I will be taking a short 2-week break, but I will see you all again real soon. Bye for now.